Arsen Ostrovsky is a human rights attorney and Middle East analyst, and he joins us now live from Tel Aviv. Thanks so much for speaking to us here on TRT World. Can you help us make sense of the chaos? How do we read this political deadlock?
You said the word chaos. In Hebrew we have a word balagan, which essentially means chaos or a mess. And I don't think that even begins to do justice or explain quite the situation that Israel finds itself in. Essentially, it's at a state of paralysis right now. We are more or less at the state we were before the elections were called for the second time. You're essentially at a point where there's a deadlock impasse between the two major parties, Prime Minister Netanyahu's on the one hand and Benjamin Gantz's on the other. But in Israel, I think, as you alluded to in your introduction, it means less who wins more seats, but much more who can form a coalition. At this stage, it's more or less equal on about 55, 56 seats. You need 61 for a majority. The difference here, the kingmaker here, is undoubtedly Avigdor Lieberman, who's sitting on about 8 or 9 seats. And either bloc will need his support to form government. For Benny Gantz, even though he might be 1 seat possibly ahead of the Likud at this stage, there's still a few, about 5% votes left to count. His path to forming government is far more difficult because he will need a coalition that includes parties on the left. He will need Lieberman. He will need the Arab list as well. For Netanyahu, it's not easy by any means, but he's got a few more options because the right bloc, the right-leaning parties, including the Likud, the ultra-Orthodox, Yamina, they are negotiating as one bloc. So they have a little bit more wiggle room in terms of how to proceed. But we have, a number of parties that have drawn the line in the sand, including Avigdor Lieberman, who will have the final say, essentially, who has, made his intentions very clear that he wants a national unity government of the two largest parties, Likud and Blue and White. Of course, himself, if he can as well. And to be honest, I think the majority of the people of Israel want that as well. They want stability, they want unity, and most of all, they want this process to be over.
I can imagine no more elections. And you mentioned there a lot about Avigdor Lieberman, and we've been hearing his name a lot as kingmaker. What does he want, and what are his allegiances?
He's essentially a secular right-wing leader. He's, on matters of security, foreign policy, there's not a major difference between him, the Likud, Blue and White, to be honest. Some minor differences, but not major. But the real issue with him is he is also extremely secular. And one of the reasons we have gone to this election is because he has said that he will not sit in government with the ultra-Orthodox, primarily because he disagrees with them on the role of religion and state. For example, one of the major issues is the role of the draft, where he's saying that ultra-Orthodox and other sectors of society, including the Arab-Israeli community, at this stage they're exempt from serving in the army or performing civil service. He says that needs to change. He's also very passionately advocating for other issues, including transportation during the Sabbath, on civil marriages. So in many ways, he is extremely secular, and that is in stark contrast to the ultra-Orthodox, who are the political opposite in that regard. So we have an impasse because of that, and essentially, in order for this to be concluded, someone will need to cave, more or less. Either the ultra-Orthodox, perhaps, cave or show more flexibility to some of his demands, or Blue and White decide to join a coalition with Netanyahu. But then they've said they will not join a coalition as long as the Prime Minister is indicted. The Prime Minister has not been indicted yet. He's only going to a hearing in a few weeks, and even then it'll take time to determine whether he will be, and if so, on what charges. So at this stage, it seems like neither Likud of Netanyahu or Blue and White of Benny Gantz will be able to form a coalition without his support.
Okay, and your prediction, do you think that we will see a third round of elections?
My prediction. Look, if you wanted a prediction from me, I'm terribly sorry, I'm going to have to disappoint you. I don't think anyone fully knows exactly how this will conclude, in what shape or form the government will look. The one thing that is certain, no one wants to go to a third election. People want this process to end. People want a decision. People want unity. People want the government to work as it ought to work. So there'll be enormous pressure now also coming on the president, Reuven Rivlin, to navigate this this mess and try and find a compromise solution that will suffice to enough parties to form a coalition. I do not believe that we will have a third election. That is the last thing that anyone in Israel wants. We just want the process to be over.
All right. Arsen Ostrovsky, thanks so much for helping us make sense of the chaos, the balagant, as you say in Hebrew. Thanks for teaching us that word and speaking to us on TRT World. Thank you.